I was called into the meeting on a Wednesday. No warning. Just a short email from HR with the subject line, Budget Review Touchpoint, 11:30 a.m. today. Touchpoint is one of those words they use when they're about to touch your livelihood and point it toward the exit. I wore my usual business casual armor, navy blazer, stretch fit slacks, and a smile that said, "Whatever this is, I'm ready." Spoiler, I wasn't. Inside the conference room were two people. I'll call them Dan and Smiles. Dan was the numbers guy, always had a spreadsheet open, even when he was ordering coffee. Smiles was the newer one, fresh out of grad school, with that overly practiced empathy they teach in HR workshops. You know the look, head tilted, eyebrows knitted just enough to seem human. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," Smiles said, gesturing for me to sit. Dan didn't look up from his laptop. "Let's get right to it." He spun the screen toward me. Pie charts, color-coded salary bands. My name highlighted in a shade of red I found personally offensive. "We've been directed to make immediate budget adjustments across departments," he said. "Unfortunately, that includes compensation realignments." I stared at the screen. Compensation realignments is code for, "We're about to pay you less for the same job, and we hope you don't scream." Smiles jumped in. "We want to assure you this isn't performance-related. Your work has been appreciated." Appreciated. Past tense. That was new. Dan kept going. "Effective next month, your base salary will be reduced by 50%. Silence. Like actual silence. The kind where the air conditioning hum suddenly sounds like a threat. My jaw didn't drop. I didn't gasp. I just blinked once and asked, "You're joking?" Smiles shook her head, hands folded like a prayer. "We know this is a shock." "No, a shock is realizing your zipper's down in a room full of executives. This was more like a punch that came while you were already on the ground. We're giving you a few days to consider your options," Dan added. "Either accept the revised package or I leave," I finished. More silence. Confirmed. I stood up, slowly, smoothly, like someone who had rehearsed this moment in their head 1,000 times. I hadn't. But it turns out your body knows how to behave when your dignity is being tested. "Thanks," I said. "I'll think about it." Smiles opened her mouth, probably to say something like, "We're here for you," but I was already halfway to the door. I didn't cry. Not in the hallway, not in the elevator, not even when I reached my desk and saw the little sticky note I'd left myself that morning. "You're doing better than you think." But that night, in my tiny apartment with its drafty windows and flickering lamp, yeah, I cried. Half a salary meant half a rent payment, half a grocery list, half a future. Worse than the money, though, was the feeling that I had somehow become less, that a panel of suits in a boardroom had looked at all I'd done, all the projects, the hours, the emails at midnight, and decided it was now worth half. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. They already thought I worked too much for too little. I didn't want to prove them right. Instead, I curled up on the couch, wrapped myself in a blanket that smelled faintly like lavender and microwave popcorn, and stared at my phone. I scrolled through contacts, pretending I was looking for something, or someone. But I wasn't even sure what I needed. A new job? A lawyer? A miracle? And then, like it was waiting for me the whole time, my thumb landed on a name I hadn't seen in years. Theo. Grad school friend. Strategic thinker. Always 3 steps ahead, even when we were broke and surviving off vending machine coffee. I hadn't spoken to him in, 7 years? But something made me tap that contact, and something even braver made me text. "Hey, weird question. Do you remember the favor you owe me?" I stared at the message for a second, then hit send. No thinking, no planning, just a gut instinct that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. Theo replied at 2:14 a.m. Classic Theo. I never forget a favor. What's going on? 7 words, and I could hear his voice in my head, calm, sharp, laced with that ever-present undercurrent of mischief, like he was always one sip away from revealing a secret plan. I stared at the screen. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a polite "who dis?" or something vaguely inspirational like "let's grab coffee soon." But not this. Not this immediate readiness, like he'd been waiting. I hesitated, then typed back, "Got hit with a 50% pay cut today. Long story. HR ambushed me with a smile and a spreadsheet." He replied within seconds, "Damn, that's violent." "Want to talk? I'm up. Insomnia plus deadlines equals vampire hours." I thought about it, and then I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I called. Hey, he said, picking up before the first ring even finished. Hey, yourself, I said. My voice cracked slightly. I didn't know if it was sleep deprivation or the weight of what I was carrying. Okay, Theo said. Tell me everything, and leave out none of the ridiculous corporate buzzwords. I want the full dystopia. So I told him. I told him about the surprise meeting, the way they used the phrase compensation realignment like it was a gift, and the way no one, not one person, looked me in the eye when I left. Classic, he said, deadpan. Very lean and mean of them. And the worst part? I added. I didn't even argue. I just stood up and walked out, like I was resigned to it. Theo paused, then said, No, the worst part is that they counted on that. I didn't respond right away, because I knew he was right. And you said I owed you a favor, he continued. You were right. I do. I've owed you since you edited my entire thesis while I was basically hallucinating from flu meds. I laughed. Yeah, I remember that. You kept calling Foucault Fruity Kalua. A dark time, but you saved me, and now I get to return the weird academic karma. I sat up straighter. How? Well, he said slowly, my job's changed a bit since grad school. Oh? Yeah, I'm consulting now. Global advisory work. I sit in a few interesting meetings. Occasionally people actually listen. There was a beat. And more importantly, I know someone, he said. Someone with real pull. Pull where? Let's just say above HR's pay grade, way above. My heart started to race. Theo, who are you actually working for? He laughed. You know I can't say too much, but I can tell you this. You're not as replaceable as they think. And your name came up in a conversation last quarter. Wait, what? I flagged a white paper you published internally on cross-market integration strategies. Yeah, but that was just an internal think piece. No one even acknowledged it. Well, someone read it and forwarded it up. I didn't know what to say. That paper had taken me weeks. No one ever mentioned it. I thought it had been buried like everything else that wasn't flashy or political. And this person, Theo continued, is someone I respect, a lot. She sits on the Global Advisory Board, and she's looking for new voices. She? I asked. He lowered his voice, even though there was no one else on the line. Her name's Eleanor Grant. She's, let's just say, scary smart. Lived in 5 countries, wears suits that probably cost more than my car. But she listens, really listens. And I think she'd want to hear your side, not just the HR version. You want me to talk to her? I asked, disbelieving. I want you to let her see what I've seen since grad school, he said gently. That you're the kind of person who keeps showing up, even when the room tells you to shrink. My throat got tight. I'll introduce you by email, he said. Just be honest. Don't play the game. She hates that. We ended the call not long after. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the worst day of my career had somehow turned into a door. The next morning, there it was, an email with the subject, Warm Intro, Eleanor Grant and my name. Theo's message was short and confident. He spoke about me like I was a rising star, not someone who'd just been nearly erased from a company roster. And Eleanor? She responded within 15 minutes. I'd love to schedule a brief chat. I have a 30-minute window tomorrow. Please let me know what works best. I stared at the screen, coffee halfway to my mouth. Brief chat, 30 minutes, with someone who, if I Googled her correctly, once advised 2 heads of state and gave a keynote at the World Economic Forum. Casual. I picked a time, replied with shaky hands, and then I sat back and whispered to myself, this better not be another touch point. Because I didn't have another one of those left in me. But this might be something entirely different. The call with Eleanor was set for 2 p.m. I spent the entire morning trying to figure out what to wear for a video chat where I wouldn't even be on camera. Should I wear a blazer anyway? Did people like her expect Zoom formal? Or would she be calling in from some breezy Mediterranean terrace with wind in her hair and zero patience for awkward small talk? At 1:59, I had 2 tabs open, the video link and a Google search for how to sound impressive without sounding desperate. I clicked the link. No camera, just audio. A small mercy. Hello? Her voice came through, crisp, low, assured. The kind of voice that made you straighten your spine without even thinking. Hi, Eleanor. This is... I know who you are, she said. Theo's told me a lot, but I want to hear it from you. What happened? No warm-up, no chit-chat, just straight to the heart of it. So I told her, I told her about the HR meeting, the tone they used, the vague excuses, the pie charts, the fact that no one had mentioned performance or value or even me, just numbers. I felt like a subscription they were trying to cancel early, I said, half joking. She actually laughed. You'd be surprised how often that analogy comes up, especially from mid-level talent with executive instincts. That caught me off guard. Mid-level talent with what? Executive instincts, she repeated. I read your internal strategy piece, the cross-market integration one. You're solving problems that most VPs can't even name. I blinked. I didn't know anyone read that. Well, she said, some of us do more than skim emails. And I liked your tone. It was direct but not hostile. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were trying to fix something. That's rare. I didn't know what to say to that. So I sat there, half smiling like a kid who just found out the principal likes their science project. But here's the thing, she continued. That kind of thinking, it's not rewarded in environments built to protect mediocrity. What happened to you isn't just personal, it's systemic. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's exactly how it felt. Good, she said. Then you're already ahead. There was a pause. I could hear the quiet scratch of a pen on paper, maybe her jotting something down. Let me tell you something, she said, lowering her voice just slightly. Companies love to say they care about innovation. But when it walks in wearing your shoes, quiet, unpolished, asking hard questions, they usually try to underpay it, ignore it, or push it out the side door. Another pause. But not everyone in this system is asleep. Some of us are very, very awake. I felt a chill. And then she said the thing I'll never forget. If you're willing to play a bigger game, I'd like to put your name forward for something higher. My stomach dropped. Higher? Where? Let's just say there's a seat opening on one of our working committees at the Global Advisory Board. It's informal for now, observation, feedback, perspective, but it could grow. I sat frozen. She went on, I can't promise anything permanent, but I can promise that your voice will be heard, and not just heard, but requested. It was too much. I don't even know what to say, I admitted. Good, she replied. That means you haven't rehearsed anything. We spent the next 15 minutes talking through what that observation role might look like. She told me who'd be on the first call, some names I recognized from Forbes lists, and one I'd only ever seen on the spine of a very expensive business ethics textbook. She said she'd follow up by email, loop in a staff coordinator, and quietly let my CEO know that someone with oversight was taking interest in my development. I find it usually improves behavior, she said, dryly. Before we ended the call, she added one more thing. Don't tell them you're lucky, she said. You're not. And with that, she signed off. The moment the call ended, I sat back, phone still in hand, blinking like I'd just woken up from a really elegant fever dream. I had gone from being a cost-cutting opportunity to being someone Eleanor Grant wanted to sponsor. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at the same HR spreadsheet Dan had shown me, the red box around my name, the cold math that said I was worth half. I smiled. Then I clicked Compose New Email. Subject, compensation, clarification, updated context. I CC'd HR, I CC'd Dan, and politely I BCC'd Eleanor, just in case things needed a little acceleration. Then I wrote, following our recent meeting regarding salary adjustments, I wanted to share some updates on my current visibility and pending advisory opportunities. I'd like to revisit our conversation as I now have additional context that affects how we frame my role moving forward. I'm available for a follow-up meeting this week. Regards? Simple, measured, just spicy enough to make them sweat. And then I hit send. And I slept. For the first time in weeks, I slept straight through the night. By the next morning, my inbox looked like someone had kicked over a beehive. Subject lines like, re-compensation clarification urgent. Checking in, are you available at 10:30? Leadership awareness. Translation, someone important read my email, and someone else had a meeting about it before I even had breakfast. I checked the internal message board, nothing yet. But I noticed something. The usual energy around my desk had changed. People weren't avoiding eye contact anymore. In fact, a few were hovering. Curious. One person even dropped this gem as they passed. Hey, just want to say, whatever you said to HR, legendary. I didn't say anything back, just smiled. At 10:28, I clicked into the video meeting. HR was already there. Dan looked tired. Smiles had upgraded her expression from sympathetic to extremely cautious. Then the CEO joined. Yup, the CEO. Gray suit, gold-framed glasses. The digital background blurred just enough to hide his inevitable office espresso machine. "Good morning," he said, smooth as velvet over concrete. "Thanks for making time." "Of course," I said, very aware of my tone. "We've had some updates," he began. "It's come to our attention that there may have been a misalignment in how your compensation review was handled." "Misalignment," I repeated, flatly. "Yes. Specifically, your role's impact on our strategic initiatives might have been underestimated and undercommunicated to the right stakeholders." Smiles nodded rapidly. "We'd like to revisit the proposed changes, adjust accordingly, and retroactively," Dan added, eyes glued to his notes, "to avoid any disruption." I said nothing, just waited. The CEO leaned forward slightly. "We understand you've recently connected with Ms. Grant from the Global Advisory Board." There it was. I nodded slowly. "Yes, she reached out, said she'd read my integration paper, asked for my perspective." He cleared his throat. "She's quite selective. That reflects well on you." "I'm honored," I said. Pause. Then I said it. "But I'm not interested in returning to my old salary." All three of their heads tilted slightly, like I'd just started speaking in code. "You're not?" Dan asked cautiously. "No," I continued. "If this company values what I bring, then I want that value to be reflected in more than just numbers." The CEO looked curious now. "What do you have in mind?" So I laid it out. "I want a title change, something accurate. I've been doing strategic alignment work without the nameplate to match." Dan nodded, scribbling something. "And," I added, "I want project selection rights. If I'm going to contribute at a higher level, I want the autonomy to choose what matters." "And the salary?" the CEO asked. "I'll accept what you offered, if it includes a quarterly leadership roundtable with cross-functional team input. You've got voices in this company no one is listening to. I want to hear them." The room went silent. Then, unexpectedly, the CEO smiled, like a teacher who just watched a quiet kid dismantle a final exam. "Noted," he said. "Approved." Just like that. No negotiating, no deferring to committees. He approved the title, the roundtable, and even asked if I'd be willing to speak at an upcoming exec summit. "I think the board would benefit from hearing your journey," he said. "Sure, why not?" We ended the call. Cordial. Efficient. As soon as I closed my laptop, I let out a breath so deep it probably shook the ficus near the copier. A coworker peeked in my cubicle a few minutes later. "Was that the CEO?" I nodded. She raised her eyebrows. "Wow, HR told me you were transitioning out." I smiled. Turns out I was transitioning up. That afternoon, I got the formal offer package. New title, Strategic Programs Advisor. Salary, fully restored, with a slight bump. Role scope, increased visibility, flexible project selection, and a monthly roundtable with rotating department heads. But what mattered most wasn't the paper. It was the fact that the offer started with this line. "Per our conversation with the Global Advisory Board." I read it twice. Then I texted Theo. "Me guess who just got a promotion and a platform?" "Told you. They underestimated the wrong person. Still owe you a drink." "Make it a dumpling dinner." "I'll fly in." Deal. Later that evening, I stood in my kitchen, phone propped up on a mug, watching steam rise from a bamboo steamer. I folded dumplings with quiet hands and a loud heart. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't folding to hide. I was folding to feed something new. You know how sometimes life feels like it's operating on a delay? Like the big moments happen, but your body takes a few days to catch up emotionally? That was me the entire week after the HR turnaround. People started treating me differently. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. Folks who had once politely ignored me at the printer suddenly started striking up casual hallway conversations. I caught someone from finance referencing my internal white paper during a meeting, like it had been in their back pocket the whole time. Even the language changed. Where I was once called reliable, now I was insightful. Where my emails used to get responses in a day, they now came in under an hour, with exclamation points and phrases like, "Would love your input." Amazing what happens when the Global Advisory Board whispers your name just once. I wasn't angry about it. Not anymore. I wasn't even smug. I just noticed and logged it. Theo texted me again that Friday. "Theo, so you gonna tell me what your new office looks like?" 2 steps up from broom closet, I have a window now, it opens halfway. Luxury. Does it come with secret meetings and espresso? Yes to one, and I bring my own espresso, still me. But that same Friday, something unexpected happened. I got a calendar invite titled Informal Check-in Eleanor Grant. I mean, casual. I accepted immediately. Of course I did. She'd been quiet since my promotion, and I was sure this would be a quick, congrats, keep going kind of talk. It wasn't. At exactly 2 p.m., her voice came through again, cool and measured. You're settling in well. I think so, I said, still figuring out where everything is, but I haven't burned down the building yet. She chuckled. That's good, because I have something I'd like to ask you. Pause. The board would like you to attend next month's strategy roundtable. My brain did a weird stutter. Wait, the global board? Yes, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We're rotating in new observers, and I pushed for you. You'll sit in, listen, give feedback. It's unofficial, but very real. I didn't respond for a second. Then, why me? Eleanor was quiet for a moment before answering, because you don't posture. You speak from the middle of the mess. That's where strategy lives. I felt the truth of that settle deep in my chest. It's just a one-time appearance for now, she continued. But it's an open door. What you do with it is up to you. I swallowed. I'd be honored. Good, she said, and bring questions. No one needs another observer who just nods. We wrapped the call. I sat in silence for a few minutes, staring out my halfway open window, watching clouds drift like ideas I hadn't caught yet. And then I laughed. Out loud. Because somehow, I had gone from being an HR footnote to being a voice in a global conversation. That night, I celebrated with takeout dumplings and a glass of red wine that I definitely could not afford 2 weeks ago. I sat on my balcony, tiny as it was, and looked out at the city, noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before, like how even streetlights have a kind of rhythm, and how silence feels different when it isn't heavy anymore. And how maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The Global Advisory Board Roundtable was held on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Eastern Time, which meant 5 a.m. for me. I set 3 alarms, woke up after the second, showered like I was preparing for a court appearance, ironed a shirt I hadn't touched since my last in-person conference, which felt like a lifetime ago. I didn't even know if anyone would see me on camera, but I wasn't taking chances. At 7:55, I logged in. The screen filled slowly. Name after name appeared, some with video off, others with beautifully curated home office backdrops. One had a live feed of a sunrise over Geneva. Another showed only a pair of designer glasses resting on a sleek desk. These were people whose LinkedIn pages looked like they'd been edited by presidential speechwriters. And then there was me. No fancy background. Just a houseplant that leaned a little too far left and a window that let in more cloud than sunlight. Eleanor joined at exactly 8:08, wearing a dark blazer and an expression that said she was already 15 moves ahead. Thank you all for making time, she began. We have a new observer with us today, my name. Strategic advisor, cross-market thinker, and a recent case study in how talent is often buried beneath bureaucracy. The introductions rolled forward. A few nods, a few polite smiles. One man with a faint accent said, "Ah yes, the compensation situation. I heard about that." I smiled. You and about 30,000 Reddit users, apparently. They laughed, just enough to break the ice. And then we were in. The agenda. Global expansion strategies, talent retention in volatile markets, and a segment titled Redefining Value in a Post-Pandemic Economy. Casual. I didn't speak at first. I took notes, watched how they spoke, short, sharp sentences. Precision language, no fluff. But halfway through the session, someone brought up a case study from our company. My company. They'd received a sanitized version of our internal reorganization, the one that led to my budget conversation. It was listed as an example of leaning operations toward long-term sustainability. I sat there, my coffee cooling, pulse rising. Eleanor spoke up. Actually, we might want to hear from my name. She was inside that moment. All eyes turned to me. I could have stayed quiet, said something safe, thanked them, and kept it surface level. Instead, I took a breath and said, that initiative on paper looks strategic, but on the ground, it translated into silencing voices that didn't fit the mold. I wasn't let go for underperforming. I was nearly pushed out for asking better questions than my title implied. Silence. I continued. We talk about retention as a numbers game, but people don't stay for salaries alone. They stay when they're seen. And too often, the ones with the best instincts are hidden under managers who are just better at playing politics. One woman, Brazilian accent, fierce glasses, nodded slowly. Yes, we've seen this in our Asia Pacific division. Another board member chimed in. What would you have done differently if you'd been running that reorg? I paused, then said, instead of cutting salaries by spreadsheet, I'd have mapped influence. Who do people turn to when things go sideways? Who bridges departments? Who's not in the org chart but always in the inbox? Eleanor leaned back, fingers steepled. Exactly the answer I was hoping you'd give. The rest of the session moved quickly. Insights flew like sparks. I didn't speak again, didn't need to. I'd said what mattered. After the meeting ended, I closed my laptop and sat in stillness. No music, no notifications. Just the faint hum of the early morning city outside my window. A few minutes later, my inbox pinged. It was a message from Eleanor. One line, congratulations. You just became unavoidable. I stared at it, reread it twice. Because she was right. I had spent years trying not to take up too much space, trying not to be the problem, not to ask too many questions, not to be too much. But this was a new chapter, not survival. Influence. It's funny how fast people forget the version of you they once tried to shrink. Within days of that board roundtable, the atmosphere around me shifted again, this time like someone had flipped a switch and activated visible mode. The same HR team that once gave me the budget conversation started copying me on high-level memos. People who had barely nodded at me in the cafeteria now lingered by my desk, asking how I managed to navigate change so gracefully. And I swear, one person who definitely reported me for being disruptive in meetings actually asked if I'd mentor their intern. I smiled politely. But inside, I remembered everything. Meanwhile, Eleanor kept in touch, always brief, always meaningful. Once a week, I'd get a note, sometimes a question, sometimes just an article with a subject line like, thought you'd appreciate this. It wasn't just mentorship. It was sponsorship, the quiet, steady kind that puts your name in the right rooms before you arrive. Then came the next surprise, a formal envelope, actual paper, thick, cream stock, embossed logo on the flap. Inside, an invitation to a private strategy dinner hosted by the board. Only 12 names listed, mine included. The venue? Some old restored mansion that now served as a discreet off-the-record meeting place for advisors, thinkers, and executives who hated the word networking, but still liked expensive risotto. I showed up in the sharpest blazer I owned, which still had a thrift store tag sewn into the seam. Hair pulled back, no-nonsense shoes, and a silent mantra repeating in my head, you belong here, you belong here, you belong here. Eleanor greeted me with a small nod and a glass of wine. Ready? She asked. Not even a little. Perfect, she said. The best ones never are. Dinner was a blur of elegant courses and sharper conversations. People spoke in layers, every word strategic, every joke a test. Halfway through the main course, the man seated next to me leaned in and said, "You're the one who flipped the HR narrative, right?" I laughed softly. I suppose that's one way to put it. Respect, he said. Most people fold under pressure. You folded the system back on itself. I liked that. I hadn't thought of it that way before. I wasn't the paper being folded anymore. I was doing the folding. Near the end of the evening, Eleanor stood and gave a short toast. To those who've learned the difference between being quiet and being silenced, and chose to speak anyway. A few heads turned toward me. I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, but I held eye contact with Eleanor across the table. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She just nodded. After dessert, as people gathered their coats and conversations wound down, Eleanor caught me by the exit. There's one more thing, she said. Of course there is. The board's forming a new subcommittee. Cross-regional policy feedback, early stage. Unsexy, but important. I tilted my head. Let me guess. You want me to sit in? No, she said. I want you to lead it. Me? You've proven you can see patterns most people miss, that you ask the right questions, that you don't perform. You observe, and then you move. I hesitated. I'm honored, but don't you think there are others with more? Seniority? She interrupted. Yes, plenty, and they'll fill the other seats, but none of them had the courage to press send on an email that shifted a company's internal power structure. She took a step closer. Stop asking for permission. Start acting like the table was always yours. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Because someone like her saying that, it cracked something open. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. That night I walked home in the dark, blazer slung over my shoulder, high heels in hand, feeling like I had just stepped into a version of my life that once seemed impossible. Not because I'd changed who I was, but because I finally stopped apologizing for it. The first meeting of the new subcommittee was set for a Monday. I arrived early. Not out of nerves? Okay, partially nerves, but also out of habit. When you've spent most of your career trying to prove you're worth the chair you're sitting in, showing up early becomes second nature. We met virtually across 5 time zones: a former diplomat from South Africa, a startup founder from Jakarta, an economist from Chile, a senior analyst from Berlin, and me, leading the call from a modest room in my apartment, flanked by a well-behaved houseplant and a borrowed webcam light. I opened with a line I'd rehearsed about 6 times. Good morning, or whatever flavor of daylight you're sitting in. I'm grateful you're all here. Let's build something honest. And just like that, we were off. Our mission was to collect and synthesize policy feedback across global branches, things that seemed minor on paper, but shaped employee lives in outsized ways. Salary transparency, mental health leave, promotion pathways, flexible schedules for care work, the messy, lived-in policies that affect real people, especially the ones not already sitting at decision-making tables. In the beginning, some of the others hesitated. You could hear it in their voices, that lingering worry about saying something too bold, too honest. But the more we talked, the more it shifted. The diplomat shared a story about field offices requesting nap rooms because their team was burning out from round-the-clock emergency calls. The startup founder admitted her company dropped wellness perks and just gave people more PTO, and morale skyrocketed. The analyst from Berlin said, "I feel like we're all just asking for permission to be human at work." I smiled. Well, if we're rewriting policy, let's start there. By the end of the session, we had the outlines of a working document. Nothing fancy, but real, honest, unvarnished. That night, I sent Eleanor a brief summary. She responded with 4 words. Keep going, it's working. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a side project. This was the point. All those years I'd spent wondering why no one noticed when I did the right thing, it was because I was playing in systems that weren't designed to reward quiet leadership. They rewarded flash, politics, compliance masked as collaboration. But here in this slightly chaotic, refreshingly candid subcommittee, I was finally seeing the value of everything they once told me to tone down. I stopped filtering myself in meetings. I stopped checking every sentence for how it would land. And the more I spoke plainly, the more people leaned in. Not long after, I received another invite, this one for a company-wide summit. Not as a participant, as a keynote speaker. Topic: Quiet Power, Influence Without a Title. I laughed out loud when I saw the title, then stared at it for a full minute, because that used to be me, the quiet one, the overprepared one, the one staying late because I thought good work would eventually speak for itself. It didn't. I did. The day of the summit, I walked onto the stage. Not a massive one, just big enough to hold a podium, a stool, and my favorite coffee cup. I looked out at the crowd, some in suits, some in sneakers, a few I'd worked with, many I hadn't, and I told them the truth about the 50% pay cut, about the email, about the phone call, about how I thought my story was ending when really it had just shifted floors. I ended with this: don't wait to be recognized. Don't fold yourself small. And when they say it's just business, remember, business is people. If we forget that, the rest doesn't matter. The room was still, and then applause. Not polite, real. Afterwards, someone from HR approached me, looking sheepish. "I was in that original meeting," she said. "I didn't say anything. I should have." I met her eyes. "You're saying something now," she nodded. "I'm changing departments. I want to do work that helps fix the systems from the inside." "Good," I said. "Start there. And don't wait for permission." That night, I got home, kicked off my shoes, sat on the floor, and opened a fresh journal. On the first page, I wrote, "Influence isn't loud, it's steady. It's what remains after the noise fades." And I knew, without question, I had stepped into the part of my life I was always meant to live. About a month later, I got a call from Theo. Okay, he said, without hello or preamble. You've officially graduated from scrappy underdog to minor legend. I laughed, stretching my legs across the couch. Is there a plaque? Do I get a jacket? There should be, he said, preferably one with secret pockets. I just wrapped a meeting with a new team in Singapore, part of the growing cross-regional policy feedback loop we were now piloting. The changes were already in motion. More companies asking for real employee insight, fewer HR-led wellness initiatives that translated into nothing but empty fruit baskets. It was working, slowly but undeniably. You know, Theo said, I had lunch with someone from your company last week. Oh? Yeah. She said, we've got this advisor who came out of nowhere. Total wild card. Changed the way our board thinks about internal leadership. I blinked. Out of nowhere? She meant it as a compliment, he said. But that's the thing, isn't it? They think you came out of nowhere because they never looked past the org chart. That hit harder than I expected. Because it was true. It's not that I became someone new. It's that I finally stopped asking for their spotlight and built my own damn lamp. Later that week, I received a handwritten note, yes, handwritten, from one of the board members I'd only briefly spoken to during that first roundtable. It read, I was skeptical at first, thought you were another story of the moment, but you proved me wrong. You listen, then move. Don't stop. It wasn't long. No grand praise, just quiet validation, the kind that sticks with you because it isn't performative, it's earned. And speaking of things earned, I finally went back and reread the original HR email, the one that started all this, the budget realignment touchpoint. This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel shame or bitterness. I felt distance, like I was looking at a souvenir from a place I no longer lived in. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I replied. No sarcasm, no gloating, just one sentence. Thank you. That meeting clarified more than you know. And I meant it. Because if they hadn't pushed me out of comfort, I might never have walked into clarity. I might still be sitting in that cubicle, folding myself small, hoping someone would notice I knew more than my job title suggested. Instead, now I was helping others be seen. At the next subcommittee meeting, I proposed a mentorship pipeline, not for fast trackers or top performers, but for the quiet influence types. The people who weren't flashy, who didn't charm in meetings, but who carried the culture, solved the hidden problems, held the emotional glue together while no one watched. It passed unanimously. One of the members said, I can already think of 5 people we've been underutilizing. I nodded. That's the whole point. We named it the Second Lens Initiative, because every company needs a second lens, one that doesn't just magnify the loudest voice, but brings the overlooked into focus. As I wrapped up that meeting and signed off the call, I sat back and realized something. The phone call that changed everything. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was leverage, built quietly, earned over years, activated at the right moment. And the real shift? It wasn't that I got heard. It was that I finally stopped waiting for someone to let me speak. I'd picked up the mic, and I wasn't putting it down. The day I was officially added to the permanent roster of the Global Advisory Board, no one threw a party. No champagne, no confetti, just a clean PDF attachment in my inbox, a short message from Eleanor, and a quiet moment alone in my apartment while the kettle whistled like it didn't care what had just happened. Subject: Confirmation of Advisory Board Appointment. Body: Welcome aboard. It was never a matter of if, only when. I clicked open the PDF, skimmed the signatures at the bottom, and exhaled. Not because I'd finally made it, but because I knew I'd never needed their permission to begin with. This wasn't a job offer. This was acknowledgement. A seat at the real table. No more observer status. No more folding into small talk while others dictated the conversation. Now, my voice came with weight, vote, visibility. And not just on paper. Real power, the kind that could shape hiring policies, ethical oversight, global initiatives. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. That same week, I submitted a proposal. Title: From Margins to Mandates, Elevating Quiet Leadership in Global Operations. It outlined measurable systems to identify and promote the people often left out of leadership development, employees without polished resumes, but with proven internal influence. It suggested updated metrics for recognition, new criteria for team building, and formal mentorships that didn't just hand opportunities to the loudest in the room. The board voted 11 to 1 in favor. I never found out who the one no was. Didn't care. By then, I had already started laying the groundwork for something else, something bigger. A fellowship, a leadership lab, a space where the people like me, overlooked, underestimated, underpaid, could gain tools, coaching, and strategy without ever being told to tone it down. I called it the Quiet Rise. Within months, we had global interest. The phrase itself started appearing in HR literature, LinkedIn posts, internal memos. We're supporting the Quiet Rise. And I smiled every time because I remembered where it started. A humiliating meeting, a shrinking salary, a cold smile and a spreadsheet, and one phone call. One phone call that changed not just my job, but my direction, my voice, my scope. Eleanor once told me that leadership is like architecture. You don't just build influence, you reinforce it, room by room, until it can hold others. And that's what I was doing now, room by room. People like Theo stayed close, cheering from the sidelines, occasionally sending me sarcastic texts like, "Imagine if you'd just taken the pay cut and eaten your sad desk salad." To which I replied, "We'd never have launched anything, and I'd still be tiptoeing past HR with a fake cough." He sent a thumbs up emoji and a chili dumpling gif. Classic. Now, I still show up to some meetings in slippers, still write drafts with coffee-stained sleeves, still second-guess myself some days, because imposter syndrome doesn't fully vanish, it just gets quieter when your calendar is booked with people asking for your opinion. But I also speak without flinching now. I sign my name without shrinking, and when someone tries to tell me this is just how things work, I smile and say, not anymore.